23 minutes until 9 o'clock. As I said just a minute or two ago, this morning we are learning about a boil water alert for Dubbo, Firgrove, Wongarba, Newmundry, Ballamore, Moggregai and Brocklehurst. It's effective immediately, expected to be in place for at least 7 days. Matthew Dickerson is the Mayor of the Dubbo Regional Council. Matthew, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me on so quickly.
Certainly not the news you'd be hoping to sharing with people around town.
No, that's exactly right. But it is important to get this information out there as quickly as possible, obviously, because it is a major incident, a boil water alert, especially given the fact, as you've just mentioned, some of those places that we cover, the water treatment plant in Dubbo does actually pipe water from there out to those places like Newmundry, like Wongarba. And if you were living in Newmundry and heard a boil water alert for Dubbo, you may not actually think that it would affect you because Dubbo's a fair way away from Newmundry, but it does. All those villages around Dubbo are actually fed from the Dubbo water treatment plant.
Now, is this on the back of the flooding? Is this what's causing the issue?
That's exactly right. Obviously, we take water from the river and we've got the ability to take water from bores as well, and we have stepped up the amount we're taking from bores because we know the water that does come down the river, when you've got a major flood event like we've got, sometimes has some extra bits and pieces in it that we don't particularly want for drinking. And obviously that can involve animal feces comes down and gets stirred up in that water, and then potentially that can come through into our drinking water. The good news is that we monitor the water that we treat on a constant basis, and there's an item called turbidity level, and that turbidity level needs to be below 0.5 for New South Wales Health and for us to be happy and safe with our drinking water. Last night it just crept up to 0.52 and then dropped back down to 0.48, so it was hovering around that level. So some urgent meetings last night and through to the early hours of this morning, and essentially from that perspective it got to the point where we turned off the water treatment plant because we've got reservoirs that can keep feeding water, but then when we looked at it again this morning and started running some water through, it was still sitting just above that 0.5. The safest thing to do is to go and let the floodwaters subside, work on the water treatment plant. Is there some other more effective filtering we can do to try and get that turbidity below 0.5? But in the meantime, put out that boil water alert for the residents of Dubbo just to be a precautionary measure.
I will go through some of the details people need to know in a second, but I think expected to be in place for at least 7 days. That's quite a protracted period of time for that many people.
Yeah, it is, and certainly I do apologise to the community for that. The reservoirs do have several days' worth of supply in them. Obviously, once we get to that point when we'll start treating water and pumping it into the reservoirs again, that mixes with the water in the reservoirs. So even if in an hour's time we get to the point where we find the turbidity is below 0.5, everything's okay again, the potential is that those reservoirs will have some potential water in there that might be contaminated. So for that to flush out through the system, 7 days is the safest way to look at that. So it is very much on the safety side, and let's face it, we are talking about people's health. We are talking about a major function of council to treat water and get it out to residents. So we tend to err on the side of safety. So it is very much a safety-first approach.
We do know that water releases from Burrendong are being increased quite significantly today. Is there any concern that'll impact this, and how long we'll have the alert in place?
So not necessarily. It's not as if the water coming out of Burrendong has got any potential contamination. It really is just that water flow coming down. And as the water goes up the riverbanks, as we've seen how wide the river is in some areas where water's coming down at higher flows, then that can pick up some of these extra things that have been sitting on those riverbanks for some time and basically brought down into that water stream. I'm not an expert on this, Nick, but I would suggest that most of the debris, most of the things that are going to be picked up have probably already been picked up. So extra water from Burrendong probably isn't going to have a major impact on it. But again, we do keep monitoring that, and that's the important thing here. We monitor the water, we monitor what we're treating to make sure what we come out with, what is treated, is of the highest quality.
All right, Matthew Dixon, thank you for your time this morning.
I appreciate it, Nick. Thank you for your time.
Matthew is Mayor.